We all should know about the benefits of freelancing because, to be honest, they're pretty obvious. You get paid more, you get to work in all sorts of different studios, you're that cool guy who comes in and helps on projects and then leaves when they're finished and then comes back when they need more help, and you feel like a bit of a superstar celebrity of sorts. Alright, that's a bit extreme, but there are also a bunch of negative things that you don't really hear about because they're a bit more personal. It may seem like freelancing is awesome, but there are also drawbacks, and I'm going to go through a few of those today in this brief video explaining why freelancing kinda sucks. The first one is one that I suppose a lot of people now face, but I think freelancers are hit a little bit harder with, and that's the sort of loneliness and isolation. Now, after COVID, we mostly work remotely anyway, so I suppose if you don't have a bunch of people at home with you, you're going to feel that regardless. But with freelancing, you are often moving from company to company, so you don't get this time to build a strong relationship with the people that you work with. So more often than not, it ends up just being a professional relationship, which is okay, you know, it has its benefits, but at the same time, you never get to know anybody on a personal level. So if you do just want to chat with somebody, you're bored, you're feeling down, or however you might be feeling, there's not really that extra person who you can reach out to and speak on a personal level like a friend. If you work somewhere permanently, however, you probably have made friends with a bunch of people that work there. Or at least you should have. I mean, you've been working there long enough, right? So after a couple of months, you probably made a handful of friends, you go to lunch together, maybe get coffees together, and you get a chance to socialize, even if your job is only hybrid and you come into the office just once or twice a week. Now, don't get me wrong, this can affect basically everyone, but if you're a freelancer, it's more likely to affect you because you're probably going to be working for various studios across the country and are therefore way more likely to be working fully remotely on the projects that you take on. The next one is a pretty obvious one, which is the instability of freelancing. Because you're not a permanent member of staff, you don't always have work. You need to find the next contract that you're going to work on. When one finishes, hopefully a new one begins. But there's no guarantee that it will. There might be times where you have a week, 2 weeks, a month, who knows how long off in between contracts where you're not being paid, and it's really hard to enjoy that time, to be honest. This is a freelance fear that seems to affect basically everybody. There's the boom times where you're going from job to job and you just feel like nothing can go wrong. And then there's the times where you don't hear anything for a few weeks and you start to think you're never going to work again. In fact, one of my neighbors is a videographer for the BBC, and he does nature documentaries and all sorts of interesting stuff. But he's a freelancer and he works for them exclusively freelance. He's been doing this for ages. I think he started in the 90s or earlier, and so he's a seasoned professional. But he was even telling me that during times of not having work for a couple of weeks, even he starts to think he's never going to work again. And that seems ridiculous even though he's done it successfully for so long. I guess this is one of those feelings that never really goes away. You just learn to manage. And even after my several years of freelancing, I still get this from time to time, but I'm able to stay calm a bit better than I used to. Then there's the sheer administration work that you need to do around the actual freelance work. So if you're a sole trader, you need to keep all of your invoices, understand how much money you made, do your tax returns, all of this sort of stuff. And if you run a limited company like most freelancers do, then there's even more admin involved because you have to do the corporation tax and company side of things too. So you need to get an accountant, or if you want to do it yourself, you need to become an accountant. Good luck with that. Don't get me wrong, a lot of this stuff is done after the first time you set it up. If you've got a contract or an invoice system that you've got in place, then you can kind of rinse and repeat. It still involves a lot of work to get started, and there are maintenance things that you need to do. So it can be a bit annoying and take up more of your time outside of doing the actual job. That kind of sucks. Another less discussed topic about freelancing is that your career growth gets a bit murky. When you work for a company permanently, there's typically a structure in place that helps you to understand the career ladder that you can progress through. So if you're going to start at one position, there's normally an idea and some help around getting you up to the next level, and those places are better defined in a company. Whereas when you're freelancing, the person who decides what level you are is kind of you, and then you set the expectation for the company that you're going to work at. But if you feel like you're a senior when you might not be, then things start to get a bit tricky, or perhaps the other way around, where you are more experienced but you're not quite confident enough to put yourself out there. So the structure in terms of how you progress in your career is kind of defined by yourself, so it can get a bit clouded. Sometimes that's not necessarily the best thing for your career because you're not exactly sure when you've taken a step up and when you haven't. But on the plus side, if you scale up slowly and just slowly increase your rate, for example, over time, then you should kind of get to a point where you realize that you're on the higher band rate, so therefore you are probably of that level. It just gets a bit confusing. The next thing with freelancing that kind of sucks is that your reputation is everything. That doesn't mean that the people who work permanently don't have a reputation they have to uphold and can just do whatever they want. But let's be honest, their jobs are safer. So if somebody kind of steps out of line of the way that a company prefers to work or does something by accident, then chances are they'll be maybe reprimanded a little bit, but for the most part they'll probably just be steered in the right way, get them back on track and keep going. Whereas if you slip up as a freelancer, that's probably the last time you'll ever work at that place. I don't mean slipping up as in like accidentally kicking somebody's dog or burning down their desk. Maybe you've got a lot going on and you don't quite live up to expectations for a couple of days. That might be enough to just wipe out your whole reputation with that company if you're freelance. That's kind of scary because you're only really as good as your last contract or even your last week at company. So you could do great work for a year and then maybe something happens for a week or so that tarnishes your reputation a little bit, and then you head off and they might just not bring you back. Another thing is you have reputation with one person or one company, and sometimes you'll have a really good reputation with a recruiter, for example, and then that recruiter will leave that company and go to a different company, so your in has basically just disappeared overnight. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, because if that same recruiter goes to another company and you want to work there, you could be in. So this is just a quick video about some of the things that kind of suck about freelancing. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't trade it in for a permanent job. I still think it's one of the best ways to go in this industry, but at the same time, it's not all good. There are some things that suck about freelancing. And if you are interested in freelancing, don't let this negative stuff put you off. I still personally believe that it's the best thing that you can do for your career and your wallet, and it allows you to expand your career at a rate that you just can't really do at a permanent company. So if this is something you're interested in, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I help people with in my website, the Freelance University. And if you're already a freelancer, then potentially leave some comments about some things that you don't like if I've missed anything. In the meantime, go ahead and like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and you can watch my previous videos here or subscribe to my channel here somewhere. See you on the next one.